Go for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I almost didn't want to stop on you. You've been running the show for a couple weeks here.
I have. It's been a fun 3 weeks. We've had some wonderful guests on. We've had some really interesting topics. As you can tell, the current events never stop flowing in. We missed you here on the show. How have you been, and how was your time away?
I have been well. Time away was pretty great. Did a couple different things. First Friday that I was gone, I was in Connecticut doing a live stream playing some Dungeons and Dragons with friends, and we raised over $3,500 for charity,
That's wonderful.
which was really fun. Then the next week after that, I was at Penny Arcade Expo here in Seattle, working in their tabletop games department, teaching people how to play board games, which is always a really good time.
Nice.
And then last week, I was at a retreat in the mountains in Washington, hanging out with some of the people from the theater that I work at, or that I volunteer at in my spare time, the little spare time that I have. When you
Very
take out
cool.
all the other
That's
hobbies.
awesome.
Yeah, it was a ton of fun. How was your time while I was gone?
Well, we just hosted our second annual GPSec down in Atlanta, Georgia, which was really exciting. That was yesterday. Outside of that, it's business as usual. We're keeping the stories flowing. We're keeping the crowds going. Everybody tuning in online. We love hearing comments from all of our viewers, and so it's just keeping things exciting around here. And I'm happy you're back. I'm ready to have an awesome show.
I'm ready to have an awesome show as well. I'm glad that GPSec, I heard you were saying that you talked to some people who are all excited to see the show.
Apparently we have quite a bit of fans, and so everybody who's tuning in online right now and watching along, thank you. Right, there's a lot of requests of are we going to be back every week at 1:30 Eastern on Fridays?
Yeah, 10:30 a.m. on Western time, Pacific time, if that's where you're at, because that's where I'm at. If you're watching this, after the fact, you're doing like a video on demand kind of thing, we are just as happy to have you here with us today, and catch us live next week, and you'll be able to join that conversation. But before we get going with anything, we do have to mandatorily say that the views and opinions expressed by the host of this live stream are our own and do not necessarily reflect the official opinions of GuidePoint Security, because we might say something stupid. Who knows? we are fallible humans.
That's okay. It happens from time to time. But yeah, let's introduce it, right? So this is GPS Live for the week of September 16th, 2022.
2022.
So we have some really interesting stories lined up for today. You want to tell us about all of the wonderfulness of this first article that we have coming up?
Absolutely. This one is actually pretty interesting. It's got some interesting twists to it, and I think you and I had a little conversation beforehand, but Trojanized versions of PuTTY utility being used to spread backdoors and malware. This one, some researchers found very recently, is a linked to a North Korean state actor group, and they are using typical social engineering strategies, right, to get people kind of pointed towards this download, but then they're using a file called PuTTY.exe. It just looks like it is the normal PuTTY SSH until net client, but when they install it, it is actually installing a executable of AirDry, which is a backdoor that the U.S. government has attributed to North Korea. So it's an interesting one because this specific case was actually discovered when an employee at a company received a message on WhatsApp stating that there was a recruiter with Amazon, and they asked him to download, or asked them, I should say, to download a file named Amazon_assessment.iso. And then once they double clicked that, obviously that mounted as a virtual image, and within that was the executable file titled PuTTY.exe. Now, from the article that I was looking at, which was on Ars Technica, this is where you can find this story. From the article that I was looking at, I couldn't quite tell if it was like a wrapped version of actual PuTTY. So if it was still installing PuTTY, but it had this AirDry kind of like built into it, or if it was just AirDry renamed PuTTY.exe. But it is interesting in that like it was just your typical traditional standard phishing attempt, really your social engineering attempt. But this speaks to a little bit like some of the things that I can't remember if we actually covered it on the show, you and I, or if it was just something that I was working with the Grit team on for their opinions on, the GuidePoint Research and Intelligence team. But I'm pretty sure we did cover this on the show. The kind of move away from by hackers and adversaries, moving towards these kind of new file structures that can't be detected as easily when they are attached to emails, right? So it kind of is leaning into that with the use of the ISOs. But also an interesting thing here is it's something that you brought up. What's the official download source for PuTTY off the top of your head?
You know what? All right, that's the thing, right? I actually had to look it up, and it's like some kind of .org.uk. Like there isn't necessarily like, I mean, yes, I think putty.org exists, but the original, like the real official source of the PuTTY binary is more of an obscure URL. And and so whether you may be being targeted and of like, hey, you know, download my thing and run this because it's part of a potential job opportunity, or even going out and picking up domains or finding other ways to nefariously send these lookalike apps, these fake apps. You know, and when we have a handful of cases, for instance, from last week's story, we talked about where individuals were targeting popular gaming platforms because people were looking for cheats, hacks, key gens of that sort. And so they're just going after what popular markets people search for, and may end up accidentally downloading some kind of malicious tooling, or even just like a rewrapped version of the application. So you feel like you got exactly what you're looking for, but what's going on in the background is completely different. And so, in fact, one of our viewers even popped in and mentioned, yeah, putty.org is one of the places, but actually there is a separate site, which is like the original. It looks very much like old school HTML, Times New Roman, all that stuff, kind of website where PuTTY comes from. And so, yeah, I don't know PuTTY's official URL off the top of my head, and I don't think most people would be able to recognize it in these kinds of cases. But you're right; they're getting clever with wrapping and delivery. You know, help to sidestep some of these automated analysis tools that are going to unarchive things, that are going to poke into files that have other files embedded in them. Where we saw, you know, some of this with other like automatically executable archive packages in the past, and it's yeah, it's definitely going to play on that social engineering aspect, right? And I'll tell you, anytime I pop onto a box, I'm like, oh, I need PuTTY for something, and I got to go out and download it. So I know I'm probably right up there on that list of people that are trying to keep an eye out and not get taken.
You know, just doing a quick search for PuTTY download, right? The top result is putty.org. And the second result is chiark.greenend.org.uk. And, you know, then there's the people also ask kind of section of Google, like, how do I download PuTTY and all of these kinds of things. But then you get puttygen.com, ssh.com, softonic.com, all of these things offering these downloads for PuTTY. And it's one of those things where it's like, if you take a piece of ubiquitous kind of tooling like this, it would not take much to just kind of wrap it or create a fake version of it and then buy your way to the top of those Google results and look like an official.
Right, with the ability to have stuff like Black Hat SEO, taking out Google ads to target specific wordings. You know, we have a winner. In fact, Darren just popped into our comments with the actual real official website for PuTTY, which is the greenend.org.uk. And so it's, you know, and think about all the other you know, toolings that we do, right? Another one would be maybe like Notepad++, right? and what does anybody know, like off the top of your head? Don't Google it. Just, do you know the official URL? Because that's another one of those, executable tools that a lot of IT professionals are going to download and put on their Windows systems, because it's part of their day-to-day tool set, and maybe you're provisioned a new instance. So you may find yourself downloading these things on a regular basis, whatever your environment may be set up for. So, man, that's a tough one. I'll be honest with you. It's a little bit out there.
Yeah, it's an interesting kind of like thing to start thinking about. I think just from the perspective of, like, even as cybersecurity people, like we are familiar with these tools, we use these tools regularly, but then to kind of take a step back and think, like, wait a second, all the times that I've ever used this, did I ever bother to really check and see that, like, I was just like, oh, I need PuTTY, right? Like, or when you're first starting and someone's like, oh, the tool that you want to use for this is PuTTY. You don't really have any better idea, right? Like, you're just getting started and stuff. It would be an easy way to get into some pretty critical machines and infrastructure.
Absolutely.
Speaking of fake stuff, we don't have a ticker for this one. This is just kind of an in-between story, but weaponizing people's interests against them. As just a little kind of a segue here, fake cryptocurrency giveaway sites have tripled this year.
Whoa, you've got my interest. Hold on. You say crypto?
Yeah, we just simultaneously gained a bunch of viewers and lost a bunch of viewers.
I know it happens. But no, actually, this one's very interesting to me, because this is something I've seen in the wild, kind of just being around on the internet. I've seen channels pop up on YouTube, right? And essentially what's happening is it's a replay of some kind of interview with oftentimes famous individuals that theoretically are close to the cryptocurrency community, people like Elon Musk, right, for instance.
Right.
And so bad actors will set up a YouTube channel. They'll rebroadcast existing interviews with Elon Musk of some sort, and then just fill the whole screen and comments with ads of crypto is free right now. Go to this website and claim it yourself, and it gets people to kind of get excited and run to these hosted websites that are of some sort, trying to convince you to, if you it's like a doubling thing. Like, if you send me 1 Bitcoin, I'll send you 3 back to the address. And they seem to be in a really sad manner quite successful. It's kind of tough.
It's one of those things. It's one of the reasons that I still have really conflicting feelings about kind of blockchain and crypto in general is just, as soon as you attach the potential for, like, instant turnaround wealth on something, like we saw this, the same thing kind of happened before all blockchain and everything took off, but back in like the 2008 financial crisis, right? Like, all this stuff cropped up about like get rich quick on flipping houses, and a lot of people bought into that, and a lot of people lost a lot of money on it because it was viewed as a way to make a quick turnaround. And then you take something that is even more inscrutable than the real estate market, like blockchain and crypto, and you throw it in front of normal average people, and it's a setup for broken hearts, really. But also, interestingly, in this article that we were looking at Bleeping Computer about this, they call out not just the use of, like, redoing interviews or rebroadcasting interviews where someone mentions crypto or anything like that, but the use of deep fakes in these, so that people are setting up what look like live interviews and then just deep faking someone like Elon Musk.
If you gave it an endorsement, you've got my investment. And that's kind of what the goal of the target is, right? We've seen, I believe, there's some crazy Tom Cruise deep fakes going around right now, which is like a whole project in itself. But that just goes to show, with enough data and you get a deep fake video up and running, or even a deep fake live stream, which is capable nowadays, and to endorse a particular thing, to push somebody to a domain, and make it all part of the scam, and kind of to keep things rolling here, right? These aren't the only kinds of scams. Did we have plans to cover something else in this area? I'm checking with you.
I think next what we're going to talk about is I guess the White House sailing on the sailing its way into more cybersecurity
Oh well,
requirements on the winds of
well
solar
then
winds.
I'll fix that transition and we'll go. Well,
Yeah.
going from endorsements of crypto, well, let's talk about how we're actually just going to push out something that's good for the entire uh,
Yeah.
community. And so this is an interesting one, right? Coming from Federal News Network, it's focusing on the White House rolling out new practices regarding software vendors to
Yeah.
handle stuff like self-certification, that they're following secure development practices. Right. And so currently it right now it's a guidance from the Office of Management and Budget, that it applies to agencies that use third-party software, right? Specifically,
Yeah.
within the government, and they're bringing in stuff from the outside. And this also in turn does affect a vast array of contractors, software producers that are in this federal procurement ecosystem, right? Kind of uh, nice to see, because we've already had stuff like third party risk management and
Mhm.
third party auditing, where if you're a vendor, if you provide software to my organization, I need to know that you're, or if you even access my organization, right, maybe via API, via some kind of interaction digitally, I need to know that you're doing things securely. And this seems to be kind of flowing in that direction. What are you seeing
Yeah.
here?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this continues our long trend throughout this year of um, the federal government kind of taking a more proactive stance and putting out guidance and changing the way that they're viewing cybersecurity as a much more critical piece of the infrastructure as a whole. Um, and I think interestingly that this is coming on the back of, like I said, of SolarWinds, which is well over a year old now. Um, the fact that they're coming out with this guidance still, to push people into taking a closer look and requiring first party audits and third party audits, and making sure that things are developed. But specifically, um, the software that they're talking about, any third party software, they're requiring it's developed within the frameworks of secure software development framework and the software supply chain security guidance, which are two documents that were released earlier this year. Um, so they're
That's from
building
NIST,
momentum.
right?
Yeah, I think those are both NISTs. Yeah.
Yep.
But yeah, just this kind of like building momentum, almost like they're going not just from saying like, hey, here's some recommendations, to saying, hey, we're going to require that you're following these recommendations. And this, as a federal government push, I think is going to be great for, as a whole, all of cybersecurity and um, all of the areas that we work in, just because who doesn't want to be selling their products to the federal government, right? Who doesn't want
Oh
to be
yeah.
selling their tools and their software to the federal government, because that's a massive, massive contract that you can get. So by requiring that everyone be able to self-attest or to have third-party attestation for their secure development, that means that trickles down to everyone. We're
Mhm.
all going to benefit from these companies building their software and their applications in a way that the federal government will buy them. It's not like they're going to build two versions, one
Yeah.
for the general public and one for the government. So
Yeah,
um,
and from your background, right? You spent time in this space as far as like the recipient of bringing software and using software brought in as a government employee,
yeah,
right? And one of the calls in the article is that they say that not even too long ago, right? The only real criteria for quality, right, when it came to this piece of software, was whether
yeah,
it actually worked as advertised. There wasn't any real expectation regarding the security of the software. It was a very Boolean logic kind of approach of, look, if I'm going to buy this thing, it needs to do what you're selling me, right? And that was
yeah,
kind of the end of the conversation. And I feel like even in most cases, it didn't necessarily always do what it was sold. But yeah, now they're taking a step further and saying, all right, well, we're glad to hear that this is exactly what we're looking for from a function perspective. How are you doing
right,
from a security perspective? And by the way, here's some fantastically published guidelines that should be, digestible for you to follow. Right? You used all kinds of software, didn't you?
Yeah, uses all kinds of stuff. A lot of it actually developed internally.
Mhm.
So a lot of agency developed software, and that's actually an interesting thing about these guidelines specifically is that they do not apply to agency developed software, only to third party developed software.
Got
So
it.
that's kind of an interesting thing. I'm curious to see the breakdown of what they are really going to draw the line of agency developed versus third party developed, because a lot of this is agency developed but by a contractor, right? Like you're
Okay,
going to
so
have
still
that
part of that like outside ecosystem.
exactly. Like where are they going to draw the line there between what's actually third party and what's agency?
Mhm.
And the other thing too about this that I think is interesting is that it only applies to software developed after today's memo, or existing software modified by a major version change. And that I
Mhm.
think is going to be a wrinkle in the execution of all of this, is that a lot of this stuff is just legacy as well. It's not going to see an update again ever, right? It's just, this is the
Potentially.
thing we bought. It works. We built too much infrastructure around it.
Uh-huh.
So it'll be interesting to see if the next move is to say, hey, all of that stuff needs to now be brought into the modern age and have these security patches applied or major versions released for them, or we need to find something new.
Yeah, and this plays on something big that's been like kind of a hot topic, right? SBOM, software bill of materials, has been huge. It's something that a lot of industries and companies and individuals are talking about, and this kind of plays a key role in that. Also, what I do appreciate is that there is a fixed timeline, right? So part of the article
Yeah.
does call out that agencies have 90 days to inventory their third-party software, and then following up from that, they have 270 days to collect attestation letters that are part of this critical software. And so it
Yeah.
seems like the whole thing is about a 1 year timeline, and there are very clear milestones that need to be achieved within that frame. Especially, so there's definitely some what seems like some very clear guidance as far as what's going to need to happen here. And like you said, I hope that this trickles down, because the toolings and software that a lot of these agencies are using are the same toolings and software a lot of commercial businesses are going to be using. And it's
Yeah.
about time they're getting kind of a kick in the rear to start caring about security.
Yeah.
Um, do we want to take a hop across the pond then, maybe here?
Yeah. I think we're
Okay.
coming up. We're coming up towards the top of the hour here, so we should take that hop across the pond to our next story.
Perfect. So as we transition over from what's going on here in the States, over in the EU, lawmakers have proposed a new set of product rules. And what's really interesting is this applies to smart devices,
Yeah.
IoT things, and essentially a whole suite of toolings that we use on a day-to-day basis. And it's focused on making security for these internet connected pieces of hardware important, right? And critical, that security is actually not just applied in initial development and push out, but maintained. Right?
Yeah.
When's the last time your old Android phone got an update? Oh, that thing is dated. It's we're not doing patching on that anymore, even though there's still many users out in the wild, right?
Right.
And so that applies directly to that kind of that concept, right? What I know I would appreciate all of my IoT devices being updated for a bit of time. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's actually interestingly one of the things that has emerged over the last 5 years or so when it comes to you specifically mentioned like phones, like Android or anything else, is manufacturers advertising how many years of software updates their
Mhm.
phone is going to get. Like, we promise that we're going to support this for 3 years, and it's like, well, great. What happens after that?
Yeah.
But the EU Cyber Resilience Act,
Hmm.
I think is interesting because the where we found the story on TechCrunch, and we're looking at it, it focuses a lot on the consumer aspect of this, the IoT smart device, smart home kind of cybersecurity aspect. But the
Hmm.
Cyber Resilience Act is actually covering any product that has digital elements, which means that this is just as much about like OT, right, for businesses as it is for anything else. Like, if you're talking about your OT and your production environment, which is increasingly becoming connected, um, to the kind of the network and the internet at large. This applies to that as well now, right? So these legacy systems, legacy devices that we've been using a long time for things like SCADA and for really critical infrastructure. New versions of those products, right, they have digital elements. They're connected now, and so this law also is going to impact those, which are, I mean, technically, if you want to think about it as kind of large scale IoT, those devices now are going to have these requirements. Which again, it's harkening back to what we just said about the new federal regulations on attestation for secure development. It's going to have knock-on effect. The rest of the world is going to benefit from these two.
Yeah,
because if you want to sell your product in the EU, you're going to have to apply these rules.
And it's funny you mention that, because part of the article, right, calls out an interesting perspective of how in our day-to-day lives we trust objects that have like a marking or a seal of authority. For instance, here in the United States, Underwriters Laboratory, for instance, UL markings. That when you buy a product like a toy or an appliance, right, and it has a UL marking stamp on it, that it's been tested, that it does meet a certain level of safety standards. And in Europe, they call them CE markings, right? It's very equivalent in the idea. Well, what if this Cyber Resiliency Act were to also have a similar marking, in the sense of that it meets those requirements for the software, the tools, or whatever it means, and that they comply with strong cybersecurity safeguards? Like, I think it's a great kind of a stamp of we did something rather than we did nothing.
Right.
And it's just an interesting concept that maybe even non-technical people will be able to adapt and understand that security does apply here, and the consideration has come into it. I'm a fan. I think this is definitely really cool, and
I love it.
It'll definitely help a lot of that, like, I don't know, dust collecting hardware.
Yeah. And I love too that one of the other requirements in it is that device manufacturers have to communicate to their consumers, quote, sufficient and accurate information about security risks of that hardware and those devices, to try and encourage people who buy these things to pay attention to security settings while they're setting it up, to know, oh, this is connected to X, Y, and Z, and that could lead to these kinds of problems. Therefore, I should take better care of this and be more cognizant and aware of what I'm allowing it to do. And that also includes notifications of vulnerabilities that are found. So letting consumers know, hey, this thing that you bought from us and that you have attached to X, Y, and Z accounts and devices and blah, 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 we just found a new vulnerability in it, and you're going to need to apply these software updates. Yeah. A really great step forward.
I think that hit it for our segment for today. Wouldn't you think so?
I think it did. We were gonna briefly talk about some YouTube based malware, which is kind of interesting, but we can hit that next week, I guess. So
it's all good. And we had some great comments coming in today. So really quickly, I do want to say thanks to both James and Darren for participating in the conversation. And we'll also continue this conversation down in the comments after this video recording has ended. So please feel free to always, take that opportunity to follow up with us. And we will follow up with you too, because we love hearing what you have to say. It does add to the conversation, and it gives everybody a little bit more insight. So keep it up.
Yeah. I think I want to call out Darren's comment there really quickly, though, because he made a great point. We rely too much on individual end users to configure things like home routers and many other devices, when we should be focusing on taking out those large things that we know up front. Hey, this is going to be an issue. These are going to be problems. Doing things like geo blocking, and taking measures from a public standpoint to make things more secure, instead of relying on end users to be able to maintain a trove of information in their head about every device that they own. So thank you so much for joining us. Brandon, hey, thanks for coming in. Thank you guys for watching live. If you've been watching this on demand, you can still leave comments on it. We'll still be able to see them. We hope to see you again next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. So 10:30 Pacific, 1:30 Eastern on Fridays. And as always, I have been and will continue to be Tristan Morris.
And I am Jonathan Singer. And again, this was GPS Live for the week of September 16th, 2022. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Have a great one.
On behalf of GuidePoint Security, we hope you all have a wonderful weekend. Oh, I forgot to pull up the ending video. There we go. Let's pull the outro video. Hey, we're
Go for it.
professionals.